The reMarkable Paper Pro Move was certainly the most unique e-ink device launched in 2025. However, for almost every pro, there's also a con. In this video, I'll walk you through all those. Now, the first most important topic, I think, is the physical shape of the device. It's a 16:9 aspect ratio, which is something new in the e-ink note-taking world. And I do find that the vertical shape lends much better towards vertical style note-taking. This is a list item of the things I'm going to talk about in this video. That is more what I tend to find myself doing on this device. So the other way I use it is under my laptop. It fits nicely because of that thin form factor. And so I can rotate it and then use it as a little note taker or for some minutes or something like that under the laptop, or when I'm doing research, for example. But then you will have to be scrolling much more often. And with the color of Gallery 3, you will see it flashing more like that if you're using color. But if you do black and white note taking, that shouldn't be an issue. And width-wise like this, it does match the RM2, the reMarkable 2. It's a little bit wider actually. And you'll see the notes look relatively large here, but then when I rotate it, they will become much smaller. So the scaling can be a little strange in that sense because these small notes that I have here, when I rotate them, they're very large. Now, this device in general is pretty lightweight, and that lends towards throwing it in my bag all the time, and it's a no-brainer to take with me. But in general, I do tend to still throw it in bags. Now that we're in the fall and winter, I will be wearing more jackets, so I do think it'll be handy for putting in things like that. But compared to a phone, it is sizably bigger, so it's not gonna fit everywhere that your phone can fit. And then with the true colors, it is a pretty unique experience. It does get relatively vibrant, and you can actually increase the Frontlight brightness to increase that vibrancy a little bit. But the one downside is the excess flashing you can see. And in PDFs, it's actually not that bad. It just does a quick little flash like that. But then when note taking, it seems to do more flashes for some reason. And then the biggest elephant in the room is obviously the pricing of this. So this device comes in around $450, and then when you spec it sometimes the way you want, it's going to be well over $500. I've mentioned it before. I think reMarkable should have really added an option to have no marker, because people that have a Paper Pro could just reuse their marker for this, and that would bring the entry cost a little bit cheaper. But one way you can bring down the cost a little bit is by getting an aftermarket folio. So this one, I believe, was in the $70-something price range, but the IO2 cases are pretty good quality, and they still maintain the features of the flap, for example, and the magnetic attachment point of the device. And then one thing I'm really glad I found was this attachment grip for the Stylus. This is the Marker Plus here, but it would work on the marker as well. You can see it's cut there, so it still magnetically attaches just as strong as it would. I bought this one previously, which still magnetically attached well, but you can see it's much bigger. So it ended up interfering a little bit with the flap here. But this one, I can use the flap, and I find it gives me a much better grip. I have relatively large hands. When drawing and note-taking, I think it makes me a little bit neater and just feels more comfortable, and I get less fatigue overall. So I'll link this below. You could also do this one, but then you will likely not be able to use the flap. I think it's the best accessory I've found for the reMarkable platform. Or if you have a Paper Pro large, I'm also using it on my V-Woods, for example. Just a nice option to make it more comfortable. Getting into the marker, the tips I generally find to last me about a month and a half, maybe 2 months if I'm lucky, but you do get that scratchy sound like it's a pencil on paper. The one drawback being that for straight lines, there is a little bit of wobble from the capacitive stylus in here, and then it does charge here. So charging is never really an issue if you just always keep it on the device here. The downside being that you have to buy these markers from reMarkable, and they are relatively expensive. And the other downside could be the tapping noise it makes when you make contact on the device. That can annoy some people. Personally, it doesn't really annoy me. And then for the handheld ability of this device, I do generally find that my hand tends to hover a lot more. So because it's so narrow, there's very few times where I'm making full contact on the screen. You can see when I'm at the halfway point here already, my hand's already starting to hover off. And so I find that because my hand is hovering a lot, my handwriting doesn't tend to be the neatest on this. It's a little bit of a different story if I have it on a table. Because it is also thicker than the Paper Pro, I do find my hand is a little removed, and then sometimes when I'm on the edges, it just feels a little bit awkward, whereas I don't feel like I have that issue on the Supernote Nomad. When I'm getting off of the device already, I feel like I'm already on the trailing part of the sentence or whatever I was writing. So I have found generally my neatness on here has not been as good. But for my workflow, that tends to be fine because, like I mentioned, the way I use this device is generally if I'm taking notes and doing research, or if I'm making quick list items, then I will tend to rewrite those later on a device where I can write a little bit neater and have a better looking note. And then generally, because Gallery 3 is a darker panel, I do find myself using the Frontlight a lot. The battery life tends to not be the best on this. I've found myself charging it every 2 to 3 days roughly, which is much less than my other eink devices. But on the plus side, it does have the quick charge here. So it's very easy to top up quickly. And in 45 minutes, it gets to about 90%. So the battery life is not the greatest. It's definitely less than the Big Paper Pro and these other devices I have. But in general, with the quick charge feature, I don't find it to be that big of an issue. My hunch is that having the Frontlight on a lot does diminish the battery life. And another thing is I don't really find it very comfortable to use with the case when in handheld mode. I either find myself putting my thumb here or like putting it in the crease in here. Honestly, I rarely use it like that. I would much rather just take it out and use it like this. And then I find it to be pretty suitable and comfortable. Segueing into the build quality, it is generally very good. And they did change the back, so it has much more texture and grip now. It has very good grip. And I believe it's also supposed to be easier to repair. One thing that I find a little bit of a miss here is with something that's this good build quality and a sealed design generally, I'm surprised that there's no IPX water rating. So there's no ingress protection on water. And for something that could potentially be a very good ebook reader, that seems like something that they should have taken into account and changed from the Big Paper Pro to me. But on the plus side, it should be easier to repair with the back being able to pop out. But those are adhesives, I believe. So not as easy as something like this where you can get into it yourself. And then one of the pros of the Connect subscription is that it does have the best app sync in general. So when I'm syncing between this device and the RM2 or the Paper Pro, it works very well and pretty seamlessly. And now they have more advanced features like the handwriting search, which I'll probably do a video on soon. But the downside is, of course, that you need to pay a $2.99 per month subscription fee for that. And then digging into ebook reading on here, the EPUB support isn't great because there's A, no dedicated app, and B, the limited functionality of you have to have DRM-free EPUBs. But there is no native bookstore or a Kindle bookstore, for example, on here. There are workarounds through this. I know Calibre is good at getting PDFs formatted or EPUBs, and there's some other ways to do it too that I've seen on Reddit. So I'm probably gonna do a very specific video on maximizing your ebook reading potential on here. So stay tuned for that. But out of the box, it is a mixed experience. It is good because of the Frontlight here, which enables you to read in the dark and set that to the profile you like. But you can see there is a large amount of wasted space in the vertical format because reMarkable doesn't have any inbuilt options for that. And also, for example, I've seen people on Reddit that split it and it splits this way in 2 columns like that because it is very wide. So I'm gonna look into that. Then for PDFs, it's a little bit of a mixed bag. I do think the higher PPI from the reMarkable Paper Pro big version is good because the small text that you're looking at appears to be a little bit sharper, but there is a lot of the flashing like I mentioned. And then also when you rotate it in its side mode, I did a little comparison on the Nomad to it, and the Nomad splits the pages in half. So when you scroll, you get half a page, whereas this, it doesn't really do that. This PDF is meant to be formatted vertically, so you're really gonna have to do a lot of scrolling around. But on the plus side, you do get color for it. And that's something I'll also look at Calibre for formatting PDFs on here too. But I'd really like to see reMarkable natively do more optimization on PDFs in this device. It is a very new device, so perhaps that could be something they're working on. If you want to see it compared to the Nomad, I did a video recently up here, we can check that out. And I will do an EPUB video or ebook video like I mentioned, so I'll put that here if you want to see it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.